good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to yet another episode of the Entreprenova Founder Webcast. Today we're going to discuss purpose and passion. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Good. We were just talking about how cold it is where I'm at. It was 11 degrees out this morning when I took the dog for a walk, and we didn't make it very far. So we don't. I haven't quite brought my hardiness up to winter standards yet. So, but no, I'm doing good. Otherwise, good to see
Okay.
you.
Yes, good to see you as well. Let's get started with our introductions. And of course, if you are watching this, you're very welcome to introduce yourself in the chat as well. It would be lovely to know where you're connecting from. If there's any comments or any questions, we'd be happy to address them as well. So please do introduce yourself in the chat. Tom, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Tom Clement, and I'm an assistant professor of management at Minnesota State University, Mankato, which is in the lovely and beautiful state of Minnesota, right south of the Twin Cities. And we're in the depths of winter almost here. So I appreciate having you. And as Inge said, I love to see the names pop up in the chat and especially find out where you're from. So please go ahead and do that. Inge?
Yes, so my name is Inge de Dreu. I am Dutch, but what has really marked my life is that I've lived in Colombia for a long time and I've worked a lot with entrepreneurship over there, with universities, but also with a nationwide accelerator program. And from that experience, I've created a game, and it's a serious game called the Playground for Entrepreneurs. It's really a coaching tool to be used by coaches and educators. So that's what I'm doing right now. So let's get started. Passion and purpose. And I see already somebody from Minnesota, also chilly Minnesota.
Yeah, chilly Minnesota. We always have to throw that in there, that disclaimer.
Yes, a couple of people actually from Minnesota, from
Hey,
Mankato.
Mohammed. Good to see you. One of my students. Good to see you, Mohammed.
So let's get started with passion and purpose. I used to say passion is to entrepreneurship what fuel is to a vehicle. What do you think about that, Tom?
Yes, it is. And what we've sort of talked about is the fuel is great, but you have to have somebody driving it. And sometimes that's your purpose. Is the way that you sort of drive the vehicle. And we talk about passions, and a lot of times you think about that. That's really the emotion, the motivation side of it, and a lot of times our feelings. And what's interesting about it is we talk about passion in the context of entrepreneurship a lot. In fact, sometimes I think we talk about it a little bit too much. But
Yes.
what's really interesting is when you get into the business space, oftentimes we warn people, leave your emotions out of it, leave your feelings out of it, which I don't necessarily always agree with. I think emotions and feelings always play a role regardless. But I can sort of understand why we try to get ourselves to divorce, our minds a little bit from the feeling side of it. But then you get into the purpose, and we're really talking about the reason we do something or the contribution that we're making by doing it. As Simon Sinek would refer to, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the why behind what we do. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely that fuel, but then there's also that sort of steering mechanism in our head, and that might be more to the purpose side of things.
Definitely. I think in order to define passion a little bit, when I was attending business school years back, they were always talking about passion, and I never really felt that I related to that type of passion. I do think we talk about that too much, and we maybe put too much emphasis on a certain type of passion. However, feelings, of course, are very important. I'd argue that many entrepreneurs are not exactly entrepreneurs. They may be entrepreneurs because of the money, but they do this type of business because they have a certain feeling towards either the market or the problem or the product or anything that's in the business, the theme or the industry of the business. And that's actually what makes them tick. So the impact or the thing that they want to achieve through their business, which is bigger than money. Money is a secondary effect in that sense,
Right.
an important one, but it is a secondary effect. That is really what makes people go. Entrepreneurship can be a very big sacrifice, right? So
Yeah.
you've got to invest a lot of money, you've got to invest a lot of time, you've got to probably sacrifice time away from your family or your loved ones or whatever else you have in life. So therefore, you really need to do something that's worthwhile. Now, that's for me, that is really passion. Now, there's
Right.
different types of passions, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that type of passion, that thing that makes you tick, that thing that you cannot leave undone, really, that is really what makes entrepreneurs go, from my perspective.
Yeah, and I think about my experience. People from my LinkedIn community and others know that I spent quite a bit of my life in the power sports industry. So I was a motorcycle dealer, snowmobile dealer, and I got into that business because I was an enthusiast. So when I think about the word enthusiast, I also think about passion. The problem was I was not well versed in the inner functions of the power sports industry. I only knew it from the rider or the enthusiast side of things, and that's a really really bad reason to get into business, to start a business just because you're an enthusiast. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to have as part of your sort of toolbox, but you also have to, as you and I have discussed, and we spent a lot of time discussing this last week when we sort of had our pre-show meeting, talking about being a subject matter expert, and really understanding the business side of things. And if you read a lot of good books and a lot of good literature on leadership, one of the key parts of being a good leader is understanding the business or understanding the functionality of what it is that you're doing, and sort of becoming that subject matter expert. And I think that's one of the problems when we go too far down the rabbit hole of passion, is that we focus too much again on our feelings and emotions about something. The fact that I love to ride motorcycles. I often joke with people, but it's really not a joke. I owned my power sports dealership for 6 years and I barely rode the entire time I had the store. I was so immersed in the business side of it, trying to understand it. Plus, you get burned out during the day. And the last thing you want to do is deal with it when you go home at night, if you ever do go home at night. I hardly rode the whole time I owned the store. After I sold the store, I went back to riding again. It became a passion for me again. And you'll hear a lot about that. And, there's a fairly famous book that I've talked about a lot that I would recommend highly anyone thinking about getting into entrepreneurship, or even someone that's already in it, should read. And that's The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. Gerber's book talks a lot about this. He uses the term technician. A technician is somebody that's really good at doing something, but then they try to turn it into a business. And trust me when I tell you that a lot of times taking a hobby or something you're good at and turning it into a business, it's not so fun anymore, because now you've got a lot of other responsibilities piled on top of that. Not to mention the fact that if you have employees like I did, now you have people's lives, livelihoods, depending on what you're doing and how well you're doing it. So that really changes the dynamic. So, I really recommend anyone looking at the entrepreneur space, or even somebody that's already in it, go out and buy that book. You can get a used copy for a couple of bucks on Amazon, and read that book cover to cover, and it changes your thinking on a lot of things. I don't think it discourages people that have hobbies and passions from not being business people, but it just puts your mind in the right mindset, in the right frame, to think about that. So
It really depends, doesn't it? So we also discussed a lot of people like to cook, but not everybody likes to own a restaurant or be a professional cook. Sometimes the fun is in like the small tasks, right? Not making a business out of it, and then it stays a hobby, and then it stays fun. Now, from what I've seen working with entrepreneurs, there's really two types of passion, because yes, we do say a lot, that you need to have passion for your idea. And there's all sorts of selection criteria about how passionate and how well interested your team is in this particular idea and everything. The thing is that over the years, we've found out that there's one big difference in terms of that passion, and that's subject matter expertise. So people who have developed a professional passion, professional experience in a certain field, and it doesn't really matter what that field is. We've had psychologists, we've had nutritionists, we've had people specialized in tourism, you had people in all sorts of professional fields, but they really fall in love with a market, or they fall in love with a problem that they want to solve because they see something, and it's the fruit of years and years of experience and a deep care about this particular customer or this particular user. And from that care, from that passion, they can develop their product. And that's also very important, because if you fall in love with a certain problem or a certain market, anything that will solve that can be your product, right? So you don't fall in love with a certain product, because when you fall in love with a certain product, often the problem is pivoting. You can't really get away from the idea anymore because you are only focused on this particular idea. While subject matter experts really first have a lot more knowledge to address their business model in a way that is fruitful. And also, if something turns out not to be the case, that it's not validated, their business model, it's a lot easier for them to get away from that and to really pivot and correct their business model into something that really adds value.
Right. And there's a pretty famous Venn diagram that's out on the web that anybody can look up that talks a lot about, passion, mission, profession, vocation, and sort of that overlapping of the four different things. And, we talk about what you love doing and what you're good at doing. When those two things overlap, that's typically your passion, your passion side of things. We just had a local restaurateur visit my class a couple weeks ago, Alexa, and she runs a pretty successful local restaurant here in Mankato. And, she came at it from an interesting perspective because she liked food. She was a self-professed foodie, but she wasn't this passionate in the kitchen all the time, nonstop, went to culinary school, all those sorts of things. What she did was she went through a business planning class when she went to school at Michigan State University, and she really learned the business side. And she wrote a very detailed, very well-researched business plan. And I think that's one of the reasons why she's been pretty successful in the restaurant business, is because she came at it more from the business side as opposed to, just strictly the passion for food side. She loves food and she loves to cook, but she really tried to understand the business side of it. Again, getting back to what I talked about before. And if you look at it from the inventor's mentality too, that's important as well. It's not only just people that are passionate about like a hobby, but it's also somebody that comes at it from the inventor side of it. It's interesting. I use some content from the teaching entrepreneurship.org folks, which are in the United States. And they have an exercise that they recommend doing with young entrepreneurs that's called Pilot Your Purpose. In other words, how to take your purpose and turn it into a pilot project like a business. You notice it's not called Pilot Your Passion. So we spend a lot of time on trying to sort of make that conversion, if you will. It's sort of like the cliche in the United States. I don't know if they use this term in other parts of the world, but when somebody is a really good athlete and they become quite accomplished at their sport, a lot of times people will say they're a student of the game. In other words, they really dive into the nuts and bolts of the game as opposed to just strictly the passion of playing it. And that's a very high compliment to pay to an athlete in any sport, at least in the United States. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here for sure.
Definitely. It's really about like that deeper learning, right? So passion tends to be, or hobbyist passion tends to be quite superficial.
Right.
When you can go deeper than that, when you're really willing and able to figure things out, that's when it changes. Yeah. So, and the Ikigai exercise, which you mentioned, the Venn diagram,
Yep.
that's called an Ikigai
Mhm.
exercise. That's a great exercise, a great diagram to kind of figure out. After that, of course, there's a lot of experimentation.
Right.
So there's some figuring out to do, because of course, like the overlap between what you would like to do and what people can pay you for, what you can actually set up a business, and what the world needs.
Right.
uh, that's really something that you have to figure out, and you have to try to build your business model upon it.
Well, that's one of the struggle areas right now, to sort of delve into just a little side discussion. One of the struggles we're facing in higher education right now in the world is that for years we were able to get away with focusing more on mission, passion, and profession, and vocation, which is another one of those parts of that Venn diagram, which sort of combines what we need as a society with what we get paid for. That was something that was sort of frowned upon in higher education. We were supposed to be expanding minds and teaching, liberal arts, critical thinking skills, all those different things. But the problem is the cost of education has gotten so high, and the need for experienced people doing experienced things has become so huge in the world that we've started to focus more on vocation. Unfortunately, higher ed has not always kept up with that quite as well as they should have. That's another big discussion. That's kind of another side topic, but it's kind of an example of what we're talking about here. I want to say hi to Julie in Toronto as well. She checked in a little while ago, and we got off discussing our topic here, and I didn't want to ignore her. She joined us as well.
Talking about subject matter experts.
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
That's part of putting that doctor or that PhD in your title, is sort of trying to become a subject matter expert in an area.
Actually, Zuli's a medical doctor.
Oh, she is. Okay. Well,
Yes.
still,
she's
still a subject matter expert.
Yes, definitely. She's actually one of the facilitators, the playground facilitators.
Okay. Yeah.
She's setting up her own game now at 78-year-old. And she is really focusing on the relationship between parents and children.
Okay.
So that's another interesting one coming up in this context of professional passion, right?
Right.
What you care about, what impact do you want to make, and how can you do that? Well, Zuli has accompanied many people in that journey through workshops and coaching, and now she is trying to scale things up with her team of volunteers, really.
We mentioned Simon Sinek earlier, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. If you want to add that to your sort of reading or watching list, along with the E-Myth and other things that are out there. He talks a lot about start with the why. That's kind of one of his more famous talks that he's done. There's a pretty good TED talk about that out there, and there's a lot of content out there. But he talks about the golden circle. The three things in this golden circle that you should try to achieve with any idea or anything that you try to do. And those are the what, the how, and the why. And when I think about, just for me, this is just my own personal opinion, when I think about the what and the how, that's really the passion side of things coming out. But the why, again, is really where you get into that purpose. So again, Simon's content is really good to take a look at, and something that would definitely be worth examining, for people looking at sort of making that differential. And we've talked a lot about coaching on here too. And we as coaches need to do a good job of sort of teasing that purpose out of people. Again, it's great to be passionate about something, but trying to encourage people to find that purpose in what they're doing, I think will help them be much more successful.
Definitely. Yes. I love Simon Sinek's work. It's used quite a lot nowadays. For me, it's been very important to find like the right why. A lot of people tend to list a lot of items. For me, it's really the bigger why. What do you want to leave in this world? What impact do you want to make? There's a lot of exercises that can help identify that particular why. On a personal level, there's, for example, an exercise. Imagine that you're 18, 19 years old, and one day you're laying in your bed, you're opening your eyes, and you think back. You think back on your life, what you've done with your life. What do you think about, and what are you going to tell your grandchildren at that point, if you have any? What do you want to tell them? Who were you in your life? That really helps to define that particular purpose and to think about those grandchildren asking questions. Why did you choose to have that particular role? Why did you do certain things and didn't do other certain things? That really helps to define a personal why. There's a different why in a company or a venture, I find, because that's really about like the bigger mission, and your personal mission, if you're starting the venture, will be aligned a lot, hopefully. Also, your employees, hopefully they align their whys, their personal purposes kind of fit into like the bigger picture of the company. Of course, people need a job, and you need to get paid, and you need to make a living and everything. But hopefully that aligns, because then you can go somewhere together. And when you've got that shared purpose, everything becomes a lot easier.
Well, and I think it's important to remember too that purpose is not static. Your purpose can change remarkably in life from the different stages of your life. My purpose for the last 21 years, I think, has been education, and sort of taking my experiences and sort of turning them into a message that I can relay to young people and try to get them set off on the right direction if they're thinking about doing something entrepreneurial or venturing in some way. But you hear about a lot of people that they get into their late 50s and 60s and retirement age, and their purpose in life changes. Now it's more about volunteering. It's about giving back. It's about all these different philanthropic pursuits that you hear people make in life. So I mean, I think passion obviously changes over time as well, but your purpose can change too. What it is that you think you want to drive into that process.
Definitely.
Change.
And we can get into the whole silver economy. I think that will be maybe another subject for another time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Again, we always manage to touch on a topic that's a whole other program in and of itself. But
definitely, just a quick note. The silver economy is for older people who get into entrepreneurship, people who are in the second half of their professional career and want to make a different move. Often they do it not because of the money, because they have a good job. Very frequently they have a good job. They have enough. But now they really want to do something interesting, which may challenge them or lead them to learn new things or have new experiences or make an impact and make a difference in the world. And those are often their motives to become an entrepreneur. Right. So that's really the professional passion.
Yes.
Right? So people who have found something and they want to dedicate themselves to that, to do that in the second half of their career and kind of give back their experience, their knowledge.
Well, and speaking of coaching in entrepreneurship, I don't think we would have as high a level of coaching as we do throughout the world if it wasn't for those types of individuals whose, again, their purpose shifts. In the United States, for example, we have SCORE, which is the Service Corps of Retired Execs, is what that stands for. These are all retired business people that have already run their companies and they've been successful, and now they're trying to impart that knowledge and help coach entrepreneurs on how to be successful themselves. And that's a completely different purpose in life.
Yes.
And that's sort of where those people have arrived at. And again, those folks are volunteering. They're not charging for their services. They're doing that on a voluntary basis because it's a nonprofit volunteer organization, and you see that a lot in that sort of retirement space and even in that silver economy. And I'm seeing some silver down here, so maybe I'm in that phase. We've got a lot of silver cooking right here, so I think I may be getting part of that demographic, but for sure. But no, there's a lot of people out doing really good work in that space. Even on on LinkedIn, you see several people that are doing good work in that space, talking about older, 55 and up entrepreneurs that maybe worked as professionals their whole life, and now they're changing their purpose and they want to do something completely different.
Definitely. Let's see if there's any questions or comments. I don't see any recent comments in the chat. If you have any comment, this would be a good time.
Yeah.
Or questions or things you'd like us to discuss in terms of passion and purpose. Maybe we can get to a quick conclusion, Tom. So for me, kind of takeaway is that passion, what people call passion, tends to be quite superficial. They're passionate about their hobbies, they're passionate about their sport, and that's not necessarily they want to get into as a business. That's completely different. However, if you want to start a business and you're sure about starting a business, having a certain degree of passion is necessary, or at least interest in that particular field. Now, purpose goes a lot deeper than passion. Right?
Yeah, and I think about again, my own life. I mean, I have a lot of hobbies, things that I'm interested in. People that know me know that I'm a woodworker, and I like to do those sorts of things. But I've never delved much into turning that into a business per se. I've done projects for people on a side basis, but I've not become enough of a subject matter expert in the business side of things to really go down that road in a lot of cases. And I think that's true of a lot of folks. And the other thing that's interesting about this that we've never really mentioned is I talk a lot about survival. We do entrepreneurship and we do small business sometimes proactively. We want to go out and start a business. We want to go out and do something. But a lot of times we do entrepreneurship reactively. We lost our job. We have a pandemic, whatever. And sometimes that's when we start to revert back to relying on those passions more so. We're really good at something. So that's what we're going to use for our survival, mechanism, if you will. And that's fine. But I also think it's important for people to learn that business side as well. And again, we can do a good job as coaches of helping people through that. And we saw that a lot during the pandemic, where people were just stuck. They'd lost their job or their company was failing or whatever the case, or they were, having to get out of their work environment because they couldn't go in physically because of, the sort of shelter at home rules or whatever. And that's when we saw people reverting back to those passions and the things that they're good at and trying to turn those into something commercial moving forward. So that's
another subject: necessity-based entrepreneurship versus opportunity-based entrepreneurship.
Absolutely, and I'm a big advocate of talking about survivalist entrepreneurship, I like to call it, because again, we talk about it a lot from the proactive side of it, but we don't talk about it maybe as much from the reactive side of it. What would you do if you were put in that situation and you had to turn what you're good at into some kind of, commercial venture on your own, as opposed to working for somebody else. But again, another subject for another day. So
yeah, I think that can be an interesting discussion. I've seen quite a lot of countries like Colombia are generally indexed as very entrepreneurial.
Right.
However, the type of entrepreneurship in Colombia tends to be a lot of necessity-based entrepreneurship. That could be a very interesting discussion sometime in the future as well.
For sure. Excellent.
So, yes, I think for once we finished on time.
On time, yes. That's a rare occurrence for us. Usually we're at least 5 minutes late.
Yeah, But that's good. Good to stay within the time frame that
Yes.
was proposed. So it's been good talking with you, Tom, and
Same.
it's been good to see all of the audience attend.
Yeah,
And
thank you for joining us, and we will be posting something in a week or so, letting everyone know about what our next subject matter is. We kind of just go by what we hear and what we think is interesting. So we'll post a topic for our next discussion in 2 weeks. And again, we're deep into the holiday season in most parts of the world too. So hopefully we'll have people joining us, and you know, we will see you in a couple weeks.
great. It's been great seeing you. Have a great day. Thank you for attending, and see you next time.